It's the noble peasant, a dirty intellectual, bacon and blueberries, a grape with many faces and contradictions. Syrah is one of the greatest grape varieties, but for some reasons it continues to live in the shadow of Cabernet Sauvignon and Pinot Noir, usually trading at far lower prices than the two kings of red wine. But why is that so? I have a whole range of Syrahs from all around the globe that should give you a good indication of what the grape variety is able to do and what not. So, que Syrah, Syrah? No. That's old. Syrah. Well, I'm drawing a blank here, so let's go. You have criticized my way of pronouncing Syrah in the past, and I've practiced. So here it comes, Syrah. At least that's what it's called in France. In Australia, it's actually called Shiraz made, and I would still call it Syrah sometimes, when no one's watching. Okay? Syrah has a long history, and the place most associated with the grape variety is Hermitage in the northern Rhone. The wines from Hermitage are so famous for their quality that in the past they were used to add body and concentration to the wines from Bordeaux. This process is obviously not allowed anymore, but it was called Hermitage. The name Syrah might suggest that the grape variety originates from the Persian town called Shiraz, which is located in today's not so wine-friendly Iran, or maybe from Syracuse in Sicily. Today we know, however, that it is the great-grandchild of Pinot and the offspring of the little-known grape varietals Mondeuse Blanche and Dureza. But now let's get down and dirty tasting through the selection. I'm aware that we're not going to cover all wine regions that produce great Syrah. You can obviously add some suggestions down in the comments, wines that I should maybe taste next time. But Leon selected some awesome wines, and I've added some from my own collection to give the whole range a little bit more depth. So the first one is the 2020 Vinedo de Alcohuaz, Tococo de Alcohuaz from Elqui in Chile. And now that I've learned how to say Syrah, I definitely have to learn how to pronounce Alcohuaz properly. Elqui is located north of Santiago, and it's quite an interesting place because you're getting close to the equator, but it really goes up into the mountains, so the vineyards are at high altitude. You therefore get lots of very intense sunlight, but also strong diurnal shifts, and the wines that come out of this area tend to be really crisp and fresh, but at the same time concentrated and rich. This winery focuses on southern European grape varieties like Syrah, Mourvèdre, Grenache, but also Touriga Nacional. And Luis Guterres, who writes for Robert Parker, calls their wines true mountain wines and says that they are from some of the most extreme vineyards in Chile. This is a blend of 85% Syrah and 15% Petit Syrah, which isn't actually Syrah. It's also called Durif, and it's a completely different grape variety, which is quite popular in California, for example. It adds a lot of concentration, tannins, body, color, so it's an interesting grape variety to have in a blend. But yeah, it's often confused with Syrah, but it's just not Syrah. Whoever said the wine world is easy? It's not. It's complicated. So I'm going to do you a favor here, all of those people who like me to pull out the cork straight through the wax. So here you go, guys. Look at that. Looks a little bit disgusting, to be honest. The color doesn't really help. And see, if that happens, how am I supposed to pour from that? It's not that smart. So usually you should scrape off the wax a little bit to make sure that no wax goes into the bottle, because you don't want wax in your wine, do you? Now, that's better. So Syrah definitely has the potential to stain your teeth and tongue. It can produce really dark colored, dense and concentrated wines, and here you definitely have a lot of color. This might also be due to the fact that it gets quite a lot of intense sunlight. That also causes the grapes to produce more color pigments to protect the stuff that is inside the berry. This is also pretty hands-off winemaking, 100% whole cluster, spontaneous fermentation, and 22 months in large foeders to not give the wine like oaky flavors, but rather round out the edges a little bit. Delicious. This is a good start. You get the blueberry flavors, plums, cherries, no oak flavor, just a little bit of pepperiness maybe. On the palate, it's grippy and fresh. It's a really light and lively wine, even though it has body and concentration as well. The alcohol is 13%, so not very high, but there's presence there. I've been asked what grippy means, and I usually use it as a reference to the tannins, the tannin structure. So if they are present, if they have bite, if I can feel them here on my gums and on my tongue, that means there is quite a bit of tannic concentration there and that they still have quite a bit of grip. This is a very good wine. I'm going to rate it 94 points. I think it's just so balanced and fresh and vibrant. And I definitely have to come to Chile. I have never been there, and I would like to see those extreme vineyards that they cultivate and taste the wine in the place where it's made. The next wine is the 2020 Stefano Amerighi Syrah from Cortona in Italy. And I came across the name of this producer when I was in Vino Nobile di Montepulciano shooting a video, and one of the producers talked about it, and it kind of piqued my interest. Stefano Amerighi apparently had the wish to produce a grand Syrah and therefore really focuses on this grape variety in Cortona. Cortona is located right next to the area where Vino Nobile di Montepulciano is being produced, and you are able to use several different grape varieties, but apparently the Syrahs are quite special coming out of this area. On the back label he mentions that the winery is biodynamic, but they're only certified organic, so I don't know how real this is, how much they actually do when it comes to biodynamic farming. And he also says that they are stomping the grapes by feet and are pretty hands-off when it comes to winemaking methods. So this should be fairly untouched, maybe a little bit natural. The wine is aged in wood and cement, whatever that actually means. I mean, when people write it's aged in wood, could mean that it's not aged in barriques. It could also mean that it is aged in barriques. Maybe it's a mix of different vessels. I'm not really sure. In the end, what is in the glass or in the bottle, that's what really counts, I guess. So again, really dark colored, maybe even darker than the previous wine. It smells pretty good. This actually has a little bit more of the pepper and tobacco flavors that you sometimes get in Syrah. Pepper is a common descriptor for Syrah. It is actually linked to the compound rotundin that causes this sensation, and it's very potent. So just a few drops into an Olympic-sized swimming pool would make it smell like pepper. But not to everyone. Roughly 1/4 of the world's population is completely blind to rotundin, and some people are more susceptible to it, and others don't really smell it even at higher concentrations, but at some point will smell it. So it is interesting. Not everyone will get this pepperiness, but this definitely has quite a lot of pepper. So there's this pepper, tobacco leaf notes. There's also a really bright and ripe cherry flavor, which is really intense and very, very vivid. There's also flavors of plums, delicious stuff. So it's really complex and it showcases the grape variety really well. Wow, this is good. Who would have thought that Italian Syrah can be this good? This is absolutely delicious. I'm stunned. So on the nose, it's really complex, complete, very well balanced. On the palate, it's also rich and powerful, but also fresh. The tannins are polished but present. There's quite a lot going on here, and it really feels like the essence of the grape variety. I also gotta apologize to Stefano because for some reason I didn't notice that there's a massive Demeter logo on the back label as well as the organic label. So they are certified biodynamic as well. So sorry, my bad. This is really great stuff, and I think I couldn't find anything on robertparker.com or Vinous about this wine, just a few really old tasting notes. So this is definitely one to watch. I'm going to rate this 96 points. I think it is pretty damn good. We're jumping back over the Atlantic and all across the United States to Washington State on the west coast of the US. And this is the Gramercy Cellars Le Collines Vineyard Syrah from 2017. This wine is made in Walla in Washington State, so not in Seattle, further inland where it's really dry and hot, but I've tasted this before and I really liked it. I was in Washington State a few years ago and there are lots of really interesting things going on there. I think I've tasted quite a few wines from Washington State actually on this channel. They have Riesling, which is usually a little bit more limey and can be quite interesting. I haven't tasted many really good ones, but it's good stuff for sure. But there's also really interesting Cabernet Sauvignons. There is definitely quite a lot of really delicious Syrah. And Gramercy Cellars for me was actually the producer that kind of performed the best in most of the tastings they were in. Greg Harrington is behind this label. He is an MS, a master sommelier, but he decided to leave his job on the floor behind and make wine in Washington State after tasting some great wines from that place 20 years ago. And I think now he's really arrived as a winemaker. It's not that often that sommeliers or wine personalities that weren't really trained as winemakers switch to winemaking and make great wines, but he is certainly one of them. The Laguiole Vineyard is at roughly 400 meters in altitude. It's sustainably farmed and it apparently produces quite small and intense berries that can be converted in a delicious red. So this has a little bit of age on it and maybe it shows. It certainly is a lighter colored Syrah, so it's not as concentrated and dark as the previous ones. It's more brick colored towards the rim. You can see your fingers through it, not necessarily at the core, but yeah, it's not super dark, that's for sure. The wine is made using 100% whole clusters. Whole cluster means when you use the entire grape, so you don't destem, you don't separate the stem, the woody part from the berries, you use the whole thing. The stem tends to add a little bit of flavor, adds tannins, it changes the dynamics in the fermentation vessel and therefore produces a different wine. Oftentimes they tend to be more peppery, more spicy, a little bit more chewy. The tannins can be a little bit more aggressive, especially when the stem is not fully ripe. And it is an interesting element in Syrah winemaking, also, for example, when it comes to Pinot Noir. But you have to know how to use it, you know? You can really mess up your wine by using unripe stems and then everything tastes like, I don't know, like something you don't want to drink. This is, however, something I do want to drink. It is quite fragrant and elegant. There's even some notes of strawberry, so rather red fruit rather than black fruit. But there is also this slight pepperiness, a little bit of dark cherry flavor, some blackberry notes as well. It's all quite complex, a combo of spicy notes and delicious fruit flavor. On the palate, this goes in a different direction than the previous wines. It's a little less chewy, a little more velvety, lighter, 13% alcohol, so lower levels of alcohol, and also just a little bit more lightness, so it kind of dances across your tongue. It's not heavy and doesn't bite you. This might also be due to the fact that it's 2017, so it's now 7 years old. This obviously also changes the structure of a wine and makes it a little rounder and more velvety. I'm going to rate this 94 points. A delicious wine. But maybe something for people who prefer Pinot over Cabernet Sauvignon. So more delicate. We're going back in time, and this is the 2010 Penfolds St. Henri Shiraz from Australia. And I didn't just grow massively. This is half a bottle. I think you can't do a Syrah tasting without including a Shiraz from Australia. It certainly isn't the homeland of the grape variety, but Australia has adopted the grape variety and made a completely different style that is now internationally recognized, and people love that stuff. It's just different. The wines tend to be a little bit more bold, quite rich and concentrated. I mean, this has 14.5% of alcohol, so certainly a bit more than all of the previous wines. And yeah, they tend to be a little bit more juicy and concentrated, even though this is actually known as the more elegant high-end wine from Penfolds. Penfolds is one of the iconic wineries in the world of wine. It was established in 1844. And well, as Australian wine became better and better, Penfolds grew alongside with the general industry. One of the most important people from the company is Max Schubert, who in secrecy developed the Penfolds range, which is now one of the most expensive wines coming out of Australia. And the St. Henri is actually considered to be the rival, the brother, that is a little bit more elegant and refined compared to the big and bold range. So this is 100% Shiraz. The grapes were sourced from different places in southern Australia. And that's kind of a Penfolds thing. They don't necessarily like to work too much with specific vineyards or smaller plots. They prefer to blend the best stuff from interesting places together in order to make their greatest wines. So half bottles tend to age a little bit faster. So while this is a wine that you can age, that you should age, this probably is now really in its drinking window already. But let's find out. We only know once the cork is popped. This is kind of a cute small cork to match this cute small bottle. But when you look at the color, it actually is pretty dark. I mean, it's darker than the 2017 Gramercy Cellars, and it actually has less brownish notes in there as well. Man, I'm really treating myself today. This is delicious. Man, this actually needs a little bit of air. Sometimes people ask why I don't carafe the wines or don't open them early on. Usually it's a question of logistics. It can get quite difficult, especially when I do blind tastings. And I do sit here sometimes for a few minutes with the wine and give it a little bit of time to breathe and develop. But yeah, I can't decant it and taste it over and over again, especially when I taste several wines next to each other. This is dark blackberry, cherries, cassis flavors. There's also a little bit of coconut, a little bit of spice notes coming through, I'm guessing from the wood. And there's the eucalyptus flavor that you sometimes get from Australian wines. My nose is quite sensitive when it comes to eucalyptus, so I do smell that quite quickly in a wine. I remember talking to Australian winemakers who kind of, after me telling them that the wine smells of eucalyptus, say, well, yeah, it's surrounded by eucalyptus trees, but I don't really smell the stuff anymore. On the palate, it is dense and intense. The tannins are definitely quite a bit grippier than all of the previous wines, quite a lot more concentration. The alcohol obviously is also quite a bit higher, but there's also lots of balance. There's good freshness at the finish. The wine is lively. It feels so young, even after 14 years in bottle or 14 years after the harvest. So this is good. I gotta do it. This definitely deserves 98 points. It is delicious. Completely on the other end of the spectrum when it comes to Syrah, definitely more concentrated, even though there are even more concentrated Syrahs coming out of Australia or other places in the world. But this just has everything in balance and beautiful. So we're flying back to the US, and this time we're in California in the Central Coast. And this is the 2008 Ojai Vineyard Santa Barbara Syrah. Adam Tomac set up this winery in 1991 after being a partner together with Jim Clendenin in Au Bon Climat. And here he does quite a lot of great stuff with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay as well, but Syrah is one of his favorite grape varieties. And I bought this bottle somewhere in France, actually. When I was on holidays, I just came across it. It's not that often that you find wines from outside of France, really, in France, in a wine shop in France. But I had this, so I bought it. Santa Barbara is an interesting place. It is actually pretty far down south. It's not far away from Los Angeles. But it tends to be really cool because the mountain ranges here really open up towards the Pacific. and let the cold air coming from the Pacific Ocean into the vineyards, and therefore the wines retain a lot of freshness and vibrancy. You can produce great Pinots there, great Chardonnays, but also really interesting Syrahs. Let's hope this is one of them, because the rating was actually not that great. It was rated 88 points on robertparker.com, but you know, they don't always get everything right, and maybe I'm lucky here. Let's see. So this is definitely a little bit more garnet in color, lighter than the St. Henri Shiraz, but it doesn't look really old. I mean, it's 16 years old. It still seems like it's holding up. Oh, the nose though. This is a bit of a shame. I actually think this is oxidized. Well, I'm sure that it's oxidized, but I think it's a problem of this specific bottle rather than the wine as a whole. I mean, this can be a problem when you buy older wines in a shop, especially a shop that isn't located in a cellar, that isn't providing the ideal aging conditions for wine. The bottles can get bad after a while. For me, this is one of those examples. It's a bit of a shame because I can sense that there is quite a lot of beauty there. I get some olive notes in the background, quite a lot of cherry flavor. But over it, there's like this, oxidized aroma hovering, disturbing the nose of this probably delicious wine. I mean, you could still drink this, but it certainly doesn't give you everything it once had. And I'm not going to rate this. I'd still suggest picking up a bottle of the wines that they make, because they tend to be quite delicious. This one though, it's just past its peak. Fortunately, this doesn't happen all too often when I make these videos, which is a good thing. But it happens every now and then. Every now and then you get a flawed wine. Last but not least, we obviously have to taste a wine from the home of Syrah, which is the Northern Rhone. And this is the 2001 Rostaing Côte Côte Blonde from the Northern Rhone. The Northern Rhone is really spectacular. The vineyards there tend to be really steep and really rough and rugged. And they produce some really outstanding, very delicious wines. And it's probably the place where Syrah costs the most as well. I mean, Hermitage, they can get really expensive. But in most other places, Syrah is still trading at fairly affordable prices, even when it comes to like the top producers. Côte Rotie means the roasted slope, and well, it got this name because it gets a lot of sunshine. It can get really warm there. Some wines from the Côte Rotie became really famous, namely the Lalas from Gigal, the La London, La Turque, and La Moline, that, well, to my taste, at least, sometimes get a little bit too rich and too fat, but I think this is more on the refined side of things. This wine is also interesting because Parker originally gave it 91 to 94 points, but it was later tasted and rated 90 points by a different critic. So I'm excited to find out whether, well, Parker got it right or not, at least to my palate. I got the cork out in one piece, which is a good start. So this is going to be exciting because this is clearly an aged Syrah. It's more than 20 years old. And Syrah has this reputation of being able to age for a long time, but it usually tastes really delicious during the first years of its life. So in year 1, 2, 3, after bottling, it tends to be quite fruit driven and ripe and intense. And then it often closes up, so it doesn't really give you everything for a while, and then opens again and can go for decades. So this should definitely be a wine that is made in order to be aged. Let's see whether it actually aged well. The wine is named Côte Blonde because this is a part of the Côte Rotie vineyard where the soil is slightly more chalky and therefore lighter in color. There is also a Côte Brune, which is more based on iron-rich clay soils, which is obviously more brown in color. There's also this legend of the former owner handing over the light colored part of the vineyard to his blonde daughter, while giving the darker colored vineyard to his brunette daughter. I'm not really sure whether that's true. All right, this might need a little bit more time in glass, but it definitely, yeah, it's not great. I mean, this is clearly the most expensive wine in the tasting, but it definitely isn't the best. So this is a typical Syrah. On the palate, it's fresh. The tannins have melted away. It has good, liveliness on the finish, the palate. On the palate, there's substance there, but it's not super strong. But yeah, overall, I think it is a very good wine. I'd love to drink this with some roasted meats, but I'm going to rate this 91 points. And is this worth a few $100? I don't think so. All right, this was a tasting full of ups and downs, highs and lows, but there was some really satisfying and delicious wines here on this table, highlighting the fact that Syrah is great, can be great. My favorite wine of the tasting when it comes to scores was the Saint Henri Shiraz, which was just delicious and profound and still so lively. But the biggest surprise to me was the Stefano Amerighi. I'm definitely going to buy a few more bottles of this because it's just delicious. But the first four were all really, really beautiful. The Ojai, this can happen to the best of us. And I think this is just from another time and not necessarily just the most profound wine from that time. So it was fun. It's a classic, but for the price of this, I could buy, I think, all of the other wines combined, and I'd probably rather do that. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like it and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Why haven't you done so? Come on, click that button. My question of the day is, what do you think about Syrah? Which one is your favorite? Which one did I miss? Which region should I definitely include next time? Let me know down below in the comments. So whatever you do, stay thirsty.